start letting people in. Okay, so there's 3 people joining. I'll keep adding people as they come in.
Okay, I'll wait till they've connected and then I'll start. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us on our Brecon Community Catch-Up with our Brecon Town Councillors. We have Liz Rinnenberg, Matthew Dorrance and David Meredith with us this evening. I'd like to just say thank you to Matthew, Liz and David for inviting me to chair this evening. Before we start, we do have a few housekeeping rules that we need to go through with everybody. Please ensure your mic and your cameras are on mute or silent throughout, unless, of course, you're asked to come forward with a question or a comment. Inappropriate language will not be tolerated and you will be removed from the session immediately. If you have any questions, please hold on to them and keep them towards the end of the session. We will be having a Q&A session with all 3 councillors. And lastly, hello to all of our Facebook followers. We are streaming live on Facebook, and please share, please let anybody who you think would enjoy this evening know they can come on and ask questions. It's a nice social evening, it's nothing too formal. So Nick, can you turn your camera off, please?
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. So to kick the community catch-up off, I'm going to be asking each of our councillors to give us a roundup, no more than 5 minutes, please, guys. We know our councillors like to chat, on a report of the work they've done throughout the COVID pandemic in supporting our Brecon residents. So first up, I'm going to invite Councillor Matthew Dorrance, who is our St David's Ward councillor. Over to you, Matthew.
Thanks, Marie. Good to join the session. It's St John's Ward I am. It's fine. There's too many saints in the room. So yeah, I'm the St John Ward County Councillor in Brecon, and really the COVID sort of pandemic shone a light straight away for us, I think, as local representatives, that there was going to be a real gap and a need for us to work on the ground in a way really that the county council organisation wouldn't be able to do. So as soon as the measures that were initially announced around lockdown were announced, and that seems such a long time ago now, so much has happened, hasn't it, since that period, we made a decision really that we wanted to try and develop some sort of voluntary service locally to be able to provide people with medication and groceries, essential items. And we started advertising that service mainly on social media because we weren't allowed to deliver leaflets or anything to anybody. That wasn't, allowed under the rules. So we really thinking about how we were going to get that message out. And then really, as we were starting to develop those ideas, we found out that Accessibility Powys, who are a voluntary organisation based here, and a local cafe called OT Callow, were also trying to develop a similar service. And it made sense really at that point to try and bring it all together and join it up and work in a partnership, rather than each of us spreading our resource, which was already limited, very thinly, and perhaps not being able to deliver the type of service that we needed. So that really brought about One Brecon. That was the birth of the One Brecon concept. And we've been really lucky that OT Callow, gave over their cafe premises. Accessibility Powys put staff hours in. We've put volunteer hours in. Some considerable hours have gone into that to ensure that people can access essential stuff. And that was really one element of just frontline sort of stemming the flow and ensuring that people could get what they need. But of course, there was all the other issues going on in the background that we needed to be able to pick up too, and really conscious that, people in the community I represent were living in really cramped conditions, sometimes in poor quality housing, suddenly found themselves at home where there were 5 people, maybe in a 3-bedroom council house that was quite small, having to school their children, work from home. And we had to kind of support people and navigate through all of that as well. And I have to say, dealing with, people I represent who were working for some pretty unscrupulous companies. And a lot of the time when people were ringing me and asking me for advice about furlough, whether that, being told by the employers that they had to go back into work even though they'd been furloughed. And if they didn't go in, they wouldn't get their furlough and they'd be sacked. Actually, when you get to the nub of it, a lot of people I found were not in a trade union. Now, I find that really difficult. And my advice to each of those people, is your first day on the job, seek out your shop steward and join the trade union, because they've got you back in the workplace. And it was really surprising for me throughout the COVID initial stage of the pandemic to find the amount of people who weren't unionised. And I think there's probably now a really big piece of work, Marie, that people like me and people like yourself, and I know you're very passionate about the trades union and you're always trying to recruit members, but I think it's probably a piece of work that we have to take forward, especially with things like furlough coming to an end. You know, there are thousands of people across this county, you know, who find themselves really vulnerable with the UK government ending furlough. That's going to have a huge impact on tourism and hospitality sectors that we know that we largely depend on in Brecon. So, you know, I think that's a mistake, and we need to think about how we can support people through that. And of course, that whole insecure employment thing, which we were faced with the initial lockdown stuff, I certainly saw a huge spike in the amount of food bank referrals I was making on behalf of people because they weren't able to access benefits. Statutory sick pay was going to be nowhere near enough to help them to live and support their family. If they were able to get universal credit, they were going to have a 5-week wait, which meant they wouldn't be able to put any food on the table and food in the bellies of their kids. And all of that really exposed what I think is a really fragile social security system that just isn't supporting people. Now, we tried to do a little bit of that with One Brecon, you know, providing food to people, providing meals that could be microwaved at home. But there's no way a little voluntary group like that, as good as and professional and well organised and well run as it was, can deliver a comprehensive social security system that supports people when they're at their most vulnerable. Although we did do our best, and we were able to, you know, plug gaps and stop people falling deep into crisis, it did really expose, I think, a real issue for us. So that was the initial stuff really that we were working around in the crisis, and also then dealing as councillors with all the casework issues that present, the problems that people have in normal day-to-day life, like what happens if you live in a council house and your boiler goes, or, you know, or there's a hole in your roof when it's raining. All of those sorts of things we're dealing with as well, trying to help the schools that we're governors of be able to get schoolwork packs out to the kids who are from home now, you know, and just really on the ground working flat out, I have to say, to support our communities, because it's a job that we do. And as things have eased, we've been able to get out more and talk to people more, although from a distance, you know, and, you know, through Liz's organisation and working together, we've been able to do some clean up work and try and improve the town as we support businesses and the reopening of the economy. Now that comes with challenges, because of course we want to keep people safe, but we have to try and find a balance to be able to get the cafes and the pubs and the shops reopen, because the people that they employ are local people. And if they're not able to reopen, then actually we're going to see the dole queue get bigger, because people ain't going to have access to the jobs that they had before. And we know how fragile it is here with people working 2 or 3 low-paid jobs. We need to do all we can to protect them. So really challenging time, lots of work, really on the ground, digging in, trying to support people as much as we can. And I think there's much more of that to do, but it's certainly for me exposed areas where we need to really lobby hard and try to join services up.
Thank you, Matthew. Yeah, I'd have to agree with you with regards to furlough and all the work that went on in the background. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that don't realise just how much work goes on behind the scenes to get the things that the government say, wow, look what we've done. I mean, trade unions were part and parcel of getting everybody furlough. So, you know, for me, and you know how passionate I am about my union and any union, and I would just say to them, join your workplace, join the union, honestly. And if you don't know, go and see Matthew, Liz or David, and they can direct you in the right, you know, the right way. Okay, so I'm going to go to the real St David's ward councillor now and ask David Meredith to do his 5 minutes. Sorry, David, I took your ward off you. Matthew, can you unmute him?
Hello. Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. Thank you, Marie. And how do you follow what Matthew said, really, because he's covered a lot of aspects which have occurred over the since lockdown happened. If I can concentrate a little bit on schools and governing bodies, because it's been an extremely challenging time for schools. And I have to say, thank goodness we've got a new high school, because getting them back into school and the wide corridors in Brecon High made it much easier for that school. But it's been an immense challenge for teachers. And I think we've got to thank them, really, because they have worked tirelessly over a long period of time. They were working not only during the week, but weekends, covering the hubs and all the rest of it. And then they found themselves having to do an extra week at the end of term And then things were changing so much on what they had to prepare to go back into school in September. And these challenges they faced, the feedback I've had from the 2 schools that I'm involved in, as many people will know, I'm Chair of Governors of Brecon High. I'm very proud to be Chair of Governors of Brecon High School. But the way that the head, the senior leadership team, and all the staff there accommodated the children and actually set work for them during the lockdown. But the work they did in receiving them back into school has been immense. And, you know, they've not really had a proper break. And I think the fact they will have 2 weeks in October will be of great benefit to them. For me as well, Matthew referred to One Brecon, and I referred to the fact that we have been delivering prescriptions. It, for me, has been my lifeline. I've done it either 5 or on occasion 6 days a week. But nevertheless, if it wasn't for that, I don't know where I would have been really, because a lot of the other work one had to shelve for the time being. Meetings weren't held, and the fact they were held on Zoom meant that they were only about an hour long. But they were challenging times. Housing issues are challenging because the properties are no longer there, because quite frankly, they are accommodating homeless people. So the opportunities to move people around and give them proper accommodation, ones where they know they can settle into, because a lot of people are being allocated properties, but they're only there on a temporary basis until they sort everything out. Just a little bit going back, going back to One Brecon, doing shopping for people is a real experience. Getting things right or not getting things right was a challenge, but nevertheless, I think we ought to say as well, the people we have actually been delivering to as well, the appreciation from those people has been immense. And it's not just from the people within Brecon. I've covered areas out in Sennybridge, Trecastle, and Llanganidr as well. And the response you get is absolutely amazing, and they are so appreciative. And I think the biggest challenge is going to be now, because a lot of people are no longer shielding. And I think we are going to encounter very difficult times in the fact that probably more people are being tested and more people are being tested positive. And I think in this area, probably we are going to find that there are more cases in Brecon than what there were before lockdown and during lockdown, now that they're coming out. So I fear for those people who are shielding and what services to protect those are going to be in the future. But I think, apart from that, Matthew has covered a lot. So I shall move on and close there.
Thank you, David. So I'm just going to let the dog finish barking. What I was going to add to that as well is that I think a lot of people don't realise how badly people's mental health has been affected during COVID, because there are people who are isolating that really shouldn't be in the house. You've got domestic abuse survivors, you've got people who are still going through it, but you've also got those elderly residents who aren't necessarily able to get out, and their walk to the shop each day was their form of communication. It was their sort of connection to the community. So I think having people who have gone round delivering the medicines like you guys have done, the food, just having that conversation over the wall, sometimes that's all the difference between going a downhill slope with your mental health and having that sort of pick me up each day. So I know it was definitely appreciated. Okay, so last but not least, we've got Liz Rinnenberg, and I'm going to give you, Liz, St Mary's Ward. I'm hoping that's the right one.
Thank you, Marie, and it is the right ward, St Mary's Ward, and thank you for organising this evening. And to start with, I will reiterate what Matthew said about joining a trade union. Anyone out there, there's a union for you. Marie represents GMB. I'm a GMB member, and I'd urge anyone, to get in there and join. Never know when you're going to need it, and the more people that are members, the better it is. I was elected to the council last November, so really I was just finding my feet actually when COVID hit us. St Mary's Ward's very different to David's and Matthew's. It's the bit that covers the town out to Brynewellen at the far end, the Watton and Camden Road. And the issues really in St Mary's Ward that I found during COVID, the biggest issue, I think, was older people and loneliness. It's a ward with quite a lot of older people. The good thing that came with COVID, I mean, an awful lot of heartache and tragedy and pain. But I think what emerged was this sort of energy to build resilience in communities, and certainly a recognition by people that we are well supported by the NHS, well supported by, you know, doorstop workers, the milkman, people who collect the rubbish. And I think there's a real recognition of the work that those people have done day in, day out, year in, year out. You know, particularly when you realise that it could be taken away. You know, your bin people might not come, your milkman might not be there, you know, your key workers in the shops, and, you know, your hospitals, the GPs, you know, anything could go wrong and we could be sort of left on a, you know, hanging dry, really. So, you know, the development of One Brecon and being able to use it to provide prescriptions, to help people with shopping, and to support people in loneliness, I think, has been really welcomed by the people of St Mary's community. You know, David has been a fantastic stalwart in terms of the prescriptions, as he says on it, 5-6 days a week. I can't say that I've done that myself, but certainly in the height of COVID, I supported 3 or 4 families, probably almost every day a week, you know, with shopping, collecting newspapers every day. I got a couple of people with dementia who really relied on that, you know, day to day, getting the newspaper at a certain time, knowing it was coming, and, you know, it really been an important part of their day. So, you know, so that has been a blessing for St Mary's Ward. I think in terms of building communities, the idea of getting out there and starting to tidy up the town, I think it is a bit of a twofold thing for us, really. I think we all wanted to do something that would get the town ready for when some of the restrictions were lifted, to make sure that, you know, things were looking nice, and that, you know, businesses were going to get the best hit, really, you know, once we started to build back. And obviously it was a quite safe thing to do, because at the time we started, there was no one around in the town. The town was absolutely empty. So it's quite safe, you know, to take a team of 10 people out and be able to socially distance and get on and do some work. And I think the really good thing about it has been the support we've had from the community, you know, for it. So, you know, we'd perhaps be out, you know, doing a bit of work on the Watton, and somebody would drive up and drop off some geraniums. You know, Matthew's done incredible work with a community volunteer, Jackie Thomas, down on the prom. And people have been very generous, you know, in donating paint, in donating other things. And I think it's almost like the start of getting things moving. So, you know, there's a couple of benches in the town that people from Pen Pont are going to work on to, you know, get repaired. So I think, you know, certainly for us, I think this idea of getting communities working together, you know, where people almost, you know, give what they can and take what they need, you know, which is a bit of a, you know, it is a coining an expression, I know. It is what helps communities thrive and you know, develop and grow. So that's been an important thing. We had a really good cleanup at the bus station last week. That was important to us because, you know, not only is it somewhere that people come, you know, their first point of contact, the shop window of Brecon, people from the estates, people who are perhaps some of the most socially deprived, they need to have a nice clean bus shelter. They need a nice place to sit and catch the bus, to talk to the friends while they're waiting. Plenty of space there, but, you know, a big space that needs looking after. So that's been an achievement. And also cleaning up other, you know, parts of the town. And, you know, I think they're fairly familiar from the Facebook postings. And then, you know, finally, the other part of the work that we've been doing, I wanted to mention, is the work with businesses. because, you know, we've got a Chamber of Trade. We now have a buzz group. So Punchmon from the Found Gallery has set up a group of the businesses across the town, and they're working together, you know, with everyone else to try to find, you know, solutions to some of the problems and to give the town a bit of a boost, really, which is what we need. And, you know, everybody being engaged, new ideas, and people looking for solutions. And one of the things that group have done that they're sharing with us and we're working together on is a survey to look at, you know, what the solutions are for traffic in the town. Because obviously there are areas where people are trying to walk safely and finding it very difficult because the streets are narrow, people are on top of one another, and then, you know, cars are trying to drive down the road. So, you know, that's been quite difficult. Yeah, so I think that's probably it from me, you know, the one Brecon, the team Brecon, and then the work with the businesses in the town. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to, you know, talk to people about what we're doing.
Thank you, Liz. And I have to say, if anybody hasn't seen it, walk along the prom and check out the beach huts. There's a dog and a cat hidden in there on a sandcastle, and my youngest goes for them every single day. Absolutely loves them. I just wanted to say as well, with regards to saying thank yous, I think Liz touched on it when you said about it being a community affair. And I think we found through COVID, I mean, obviously you guys have been out in force with councillors, but we've had sort of families and parents, people doing video stories and sharing it on Facebook with kids so that they don't feel, I mean, I know there was one little boy who said he was sick of hearing his mum's voice. So one of our residents taped a video of various stories and has shared them on Facebook, and it's worked because we've had a really good response. We've had people dropping off just bunches of flowers, going for a chalk, sitting in on a chair in the middle of the street, having a chat through the door. And it's that kind of thing I think that Brecon should be proud of, because it's something we do well. And obviously having a team like yourselves behind it as well, pushing it forward, is a really good thing. Okay, so we are now heading on to our questions and answer session. So if anybody listening has any questions, please type them in the chat box. On a computer, you can see it along the bottom row. There's a row of icons and one of them is a speech bubble. Please type your question in there. If you have it for any specific councillor, please put their name at the end. If no name appears, then I will assume it's free for all three to answer. While we're waiting for the questions to come through, I did have a few emailed to me prior to this, as Matthew's been sort of advertising it all over Facebook. So question one, and this is an open question to all three. How do you think COVID-19 has affected the residents of Brecon?
Shall I start, Marie? Okay, well, obviously there's the sadness that's come with COVID. You know, it has been devastating for many families because either they've lost loved ones or they have not been able to keep up the contact with the families that they've had and been used to, you know, grandparents not being able to see their grandchildren, people with families away, not being able to get to see them. And then all the difficulties with people being furloughed, not having the you know, good terms and conditions of employment, and being hung out to dry. So, you know, against that backdrop, I think it's pretty much what we've all three of us and yourself been saying, Marie, is that against that adversity, we've seen some good things emerge, you know, and communities have built stronger. We're hoping that the town will build back stronger, and that, you know, we will all take the opportunity to maximise the opportunities, you know, that are there. So, you know, with all things, challenges and opportunities, but I think people are now starting to see some of the good, but also very fearful of what the future holds. And I think with that, we all have a responsibility to conduct ourselves well, to make sure that we follow the regulations, that we socially distance, and that we don't break the rules, because it's the only way that we can keep people safe and, you know, move on.
Thank you, Liz. Matthew, David?
I think Liz is absolutely right. You know, the pandemic really, I think, in a way, has refocused and re-emphasized the strength of this community and how we're all interdependent with each other. And I hear quite often as a councillor, and I'm sure my colleagues do too sometimes, that people say sometimes that they feel as if the community ties have gone away over the years as housing estates and the town changes. And I think maybe that may have been true, but I think what this has shown actually is how much care and affection there is within our community for our neighbours and strangers across the street. And
Yeah.
I think it's brought us together in a way really that is a real positive to take from something so dark and depressing. I think the real sadness, of course, is when we've lost people in our community, either through COVID or, you know, natural passing, that friends and neighbours haven't been able to say goodbye in you know, the usual way. I'm thinking particularly of one lady in my ward where her street came out and clapped her off on the day that she went from the street for the last time. And I thought that was really moving, you know, to be able to see that whilst the community couldn't be there for her to say goodbye, actually they all come to say so long. And I just think that really shows a light on the sort of the friendship and the bonds that exist within this town. And I think it's really, really lovely. I find Brecon a really welcoming and outward looking place. And I think we really need to foster and develop that, because I think it is one of the strengths really that we have. I think one of the brilliant things is obviously living where we live in this sort of market town with lots of rurality around us. I think that's helped to keep us safe over the pandemic too. And I think, you know, if any of us ever undervalued the sense of place that we have, I think that's reinforced really how important where we live is. I think Liz is right too, that we also need to keep an eye on the future whilst we want, you know, to move forward and get the economy going again. I think, you know, we've seen recently, haven't we, you know, just a couple of miles down the road really in the valleys, that this hasn't gone away. And we've seen cases in Powys rise too. I think, you know, last week we were one of the highest, the fourth highest local authority, I think, in Wales for new infection testing positive rates. So we really need to be vigilant too and ensure that we're all, you know, following the advice, keeping a social distance, wearing a mask if we can when we're inside shops and things. And I know that's difficult, and sometimes I have to remind myself to take a step back, because it's not a usual way of living, and I'm quite, you know, a person who wants to be close to people. It's the job that we do. We want to hear their experiences and, you know, be close to what they're going through. But actually we need to adapt and be vigilant too. But I you know, the greatest thing, the best thing that's come from this, I think, is that reconnecting with community and just showing that solidarity with each other. It's been really powerful.
David, anything from you?
Well, no. Just to reiterate some of the things they've said, you know, a lot of people lost loved ones. They were not able to give them the send-off they wanted, and they couldn't get the support of their friends. And I think that was upsetting. What I found with people who were isolating and shielding is when they actually went back out into the community, when they started going into shops and that, they were extremely nervous. And what is worrying that some are still extremely nervous of doing that. I only delivered prescription to one couple this week, and they said, we really don't want to go back. We've been out, we went to the shops, and we really don't want to go back there again. They are extremely nervous of doing it. And I think it's more people from rural areas are finding that, more so maybe than the town people, but it's just getting used. They didn't know what to expect because they've been isolated for so long. They didn't know what to expect when they went into town. And I think a lot of people now, because they've been encouraged and supported in that, they feel far more comfortable, and you know, they're pleased to see the town alive again. So everything is moving forward. But you know, I think people have been very supportive in communities, in areas, supporting their neighbours. And people have been extremely kind. A lot of people have done a lot of cooking for other people or the baking for other people. And I know it's been very well received. So, yeah, and it's been, you know, the people who have provided it have only been too pleased to do it and have something to do. But I think that is the positivity of it all, that Brecon is a very strong community. And I don't want to brag about it, but I think my ward, St. David's ward, has always had a strong community, and this has made them even stronger, which is absolutely brilliant. Okay.
Thank you, David. I've got a question from one of our listeners, Sarah, so I'm just going to hopefully let her in. There she is.
Oh, hi, Sarah.
Sarah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that what you guys have done during the COVID lockdown, etc., has just been amazing. Both the prescriptions, the cleaning up the town, people talk about it, they're inspired by it. I just wondered what kind of feedback you've had to make you think that people would come in and work with you, or how you get people to carry it forward. Do you think it's not a one-off exactly, but we're in this for the long haul, aren't we? And you guys have had the energy to do what you've done. It's really how the feedback you've had to make you think that you'll be able to use that energy to drag us along with you, I guess.
Thank you, Sarah. Should we go Liz, Matthew, then David, if you want to answer it in that order, please?
Okay, just unmute myself. Oh, no, I am unmuted. I was just checking. Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Sarah, and it is something we've talked about, certainly in relation to One Brecon and Team Brecon, because there's something about sustainability, because obviously we're going round, say for example, we're cleaning up the bus station, or we're putting planters, you know, in the town, and we need to make sure that we've got the sustainability and the resilience to keep that going. So, you know, a few examples of how we've done this, a bit sort of incrementally, but I think it is something we need to sit down and think, you know, of a strategic answer to. But, you know, one is you, for example, Sarah, coming forward and offering to, you know, for us to use the Cubs, I think is a great example. Last week when we were on the bus station, we had the police cadets, and I think, you know, again, it's getting these, you know, subgroups around that can come and support us. I had an email yesterday to say that some of the planters in the town, the little plants that go round them, were starting to die. So, you know, I trooped down there this morning and watered a few of the pots, but also went in the shops and managed to allocate most of the planters to people in the shops. You know, most people were willing to sort of, you know, offer. Some people, you know, are a bit short of a watering can, so, but they can actually be borrowed from the guild hall. So, you know, if there's any shopkeepers out there that haven't got a watering can, they want to borrow one, they go to the guild hall and borrow one. But I think these are the kinds of things that we need to be thinking about, you know, how we can get a strategy to make sure that we keep things going. And also, I think the other issue is, you know, with One Brecon, the demand for prescriptions and for shopping is now declining, but we need to be in a position to be able to have the agility to stand that back up as and when it's needed. So I don't know the answer to, you know, in entirety to that question, but I'm glad you've asked it, because, you know, it prompts us to make sure that we, you know, deal with that and think about it, because we do want more and more people to be joining in and getting involved. Thank you. I'll mute so that someone else can.
Matthew?
Hi, Sarah. Good to see you, and thank you for the question. I think in relation to One Brecon, that really was born out of need, and the need to fill a gap when all the other services just seemed to stop because of, you know, the shock that the pandemic created. So I think we need to really be true to that vision, that it's the need that drives us. And as the need becomes less apparent because restrictions are lifted and people can get back to some sense of normality, and shielding has been paused rather than ended, I think that's probably the time to step One Brecon down slightly, rest the volunteers, you know, people like David who've been in there an awful lot, me less so recently because I've gone back into the office and things. So we can rest the volunteers there while shielding has been paused. but absolutely have that eye on what happens if, you know, shielding kicks back in, or as we see in other areas of the country, more localized restrictions. There's going to be a role for One Brecon there. And I think that's really part of its strength. And there are so many different partners working with One Brecon, from the Volunteer Bureau, Alex and the St John Centre, you know, Accessibility Powys. There's so many people that are sort of round the table now that it can flex to meet demand. It's not a set service, and actually if you don't meet the need and you don't fit in this box, then we're not going to help you. We can shape, you know, to be able to respond. And I think that's probably a lesson for public services going forward, because clearly, you know, they're going to need to change to meet the new world that we live in. So I think, you know, there's learning from that, but I think there's a beauty built into One Brecon. But there's other things that One Brecon can be doing too while we've got this lay low period. So they've applied for some money from the lottery to try and develop, you know, a scheme around tackling food poverty. So, you know, they've identified real issues with continent services in Powys as well, and are looking at how they can become a provider at a cheaper cost for people who have a particular set of needs. So identifying problems from the crisis and really working to fix them. They're not necessarily issues to do with coronavirus. They're just normal day-to-day living things that actually we've spotted a gap with, and people have, you know, had the vision to be able to do something about it. And I guess with the town centre stuff, I mean, this was really Liz's brainchild, and she's driven much of the work on this. And I think Liz has been right in saying, you know, let's see how it goes this year, but with a view to next year, formalising it and setting up a structured organisation around it that can apply for funding, can be doing stuff like, you know, Brecon in Bloom, and really working with other bigger partners to try and lift the town to you know, a higher level, so that we can compete with some of the, you know, the bigger market towns in the region as well. So lots of work to do, and the more people who are on board, I think the better, really, because you can become, you know, quite narrow looking if you're not having fresh ideas come in to be able to help you. But thank you for the question.
Thank you, Matthew. Can I just ask something on top of Sarah's? How, if anybody wants to get involved with One Brecon, how do they go about doing so?
Yeah, good question. One Brecon is on Facebook, so if you're on Facebook, send us a direct message. Pop along to OT Callow. If people don't know that, it's next door to Becca James Flowers, just behind Lloyd's Bank. That office is staffed pretty much 5 days a week, and you know, Jen, Maria and the team there will be really pleased to see you. Or get in touch with the Volunteer Bureau, because they coordinate our volunteers for us too. Or Liz, David and I's email address are all online, and our mobile numbers, you know, message us, email us, and it'd be great to touch base with people who want to get involved.
Thanks, Matthew. David, do you want to add anything on to Sarah's question?
I mean, Jesse, hi, Zara. Yeah, it is a very important question, actually, and we have already started to look at, to discuss with partners, really, the future of One Brecon and how, what can happen, and we're going to have a group meeting very shortly on that one. I was only talking to people in Brecon and in the surgery, and I said, well, what's going to happen after the 30th of September? And they had not really thought about that, because, you know, they're not opening the Sennybridge pharmacy, which it makes a big difference. But, you know, that on top of Accessibility Powys is developing. Maria really has taken that forward now, and Jen, who actually works in One Brecon as well. I mean, between the two of them, their work on Accessibility Powys has increased enormously, and you know, that's where they can concentrate on their aims, because that at the end of the day is their job. There are a number of people as well who had to go back to work, and you know, Matthew's had to go back to work. And, you know, they can't offer as much as what they did before. And as we progress, even my meetings are becoming more as well. So my availability is not quite as much as it was. So we might have to cut the service down to 3 days a week. But who knows? We can't tell, because we never know if there's going to be another lockdown, or there could be another lockdown. And I think if there are people out there who want to come along and support us, we are a team, we work as a team, and we will accommodate you and get you to know the routes, because I've been lost many times. out and about. But nevertheless, we deliver. But yeah, it is a very important question on the future of that. But we've got to work with our partners, both Boots, Well Pharmacy and the Surgery Pharmacy on this one.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Sarah. Is there anything else you want to ask Sarah before we turn your camera off?
Myself. No, that's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, guys. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so you guys have spoken quite a lot about sort of community activities and how the residents have been working in conjunction with yourselves. But the question I have here is, how have you been working to support local businesses through the pandemic? I think Liz touched on sort of going in and talking to them about watering the plants. But that's obviously based on the community. How have you supported with regards to how they've coped and how they've adapted to the pressures of the COVID pandemic? You want to start with Matthew?
Yeah, sure. But I mean, the business community is a really important part of Brecon. You know, they employ local people, they help create jobs and wealth, and you know, they're really important to the running of the town. We've tried to listen to what the business community's needs are, and obviously be able to respond as best that we can and provide the information that they need in order to be able to get through this period. I have to say the Welsh Government support for business across Wales has been absolutely fantastic in getting money out through the front door and into businesses so that they, you know, can pay the rates and support their workforce has been second to none. And Powys County Council, who've been, you know, distributing that grant funding to businesses on behalf of the Welsh Government, I have to say have acted really quickly and got tens of millions of pounds out across the county to be able to support businesses. And we have to accept and understand that we have a really high number in Powys of small businesses who maybe just employ one or two people or just themselves. So it's really important that we get the money pumped into them to keep them going. Otherwise, you know, we're heading for catastrophe. So there's been that element in signposting people to Welsh Government through Business Wales and to the local authority, really pushing businesses forward there to make sure that they've got in contact and touch base with somebody who can give them the most up-to-date business advice and be able to tell them what they need to do to be able to access support. And then there's been the sort of the ground campaign, if you like, in being visible around the business community, being seen, talking to business owners, and making sure really that their views are taken on board. So for example, there's that Monument Square in Brecon on the Bulwark, and it was really clear to us from very early on that if the hospitality sector was to reopen, we needed to find outdoor space for them to do it. So we worked with Will from the Tap, Claire from Tad Cod, Sean from the Welly, to be able to find a way of using that space for the hospitality sector to be able to serve food and drink. Now with the Town Council, Liz helped secure some funding from the Town Council for cafe style banners so that actually the town was looking, you know, smart while we were doing that rather than just, you know, a pop-up, and just really then, you know, pushing with the council to ensure that what was in place was safe, that it was structured, and that it was able to be sustained. So making sure that businesses knew what their responsibilities were in terms of track, test, trace, protect. I have to say they did. The businesses have been absolutely fantastic and haven't shied away from their responsibilities at all. They've been, you know, exemplary in that sense, and they've really worked well together. And I think what we've been able to help facilitate is conversations between businesses who wouldn't normally get the chance to talk to each other because they're in the service industry and they're working all the time to meet the needs of what people want, and they don't get that chance to open up dialogue with each other. And I have to say that new businesses, you know, people like Punch, who's opened up in what used to be the Criterion, you know, Bentley's nightclub, and now the Gallery, has been a real breath of fresh air coming onto the trading street in Brecon, because, you know, she's got a lot of drive. She wants to help Brecon succeed. So being able to link with someone like that as well, from the private sector and the business community is really valuable too. And of course, we're constantly talking with highways and businesses about the traffic flow in town, how we manage that, and social distancing. And we've got a Zoom event actually next week just for businesses in Brecon Town Centre to be able to talk about that. So regular dialogue, regular discussion, a lot of compromise, you know, and a lot of listening to try and help businesses get through.
Thank you, Matthew. David, seeing as you're unmuted, do you want to go next?
Well, I think Matthew's really covered everything there, Marie, really. You know, we will support them wherever we can. And I think it is a case of shop locally, really, and support the local traders, because otherwise, if we don't support them at this moment in time, then they will fail. But it is getting out there and supporting them, both morally and financially, and in whatever way we can. And I think, you know, it's good that we've got officers of the authority who want to work with them as well. There's a big change that's happened in that regard, really, is that people want to help, but they equally want to consult with them as well, what they want. I know that they won't all have what they want, but hopefully we'll come to a consensus of agreement, and next week's meeting should be very useful in that regard.
Yeah, thank you, David. I know quite a few people have commented, and I myself was one, with regards to the areas outside, sort of Coffee One and Costa. That's fantastic, especially if you're a tourist coming in. You can see immediately there's somewhere for you to sit. And I mean, I think that's something that could perhaps go on and continue, but you know, just come out for our tourist season, because we do rely heavily on our tourists coming in, and coming into Brecon, and you go to somewhere like Pembroke, where you walk down the street, and yes, I know they've got sort of traffic system there where it's one way or it's blocked off, but to see those tables and chairs outside those establishments, it makes it welcoming, and we look like a tourist area instead of just another town, you know, small country town somewhere in the back of beyond. We're not. We've got so much to offer, and to have those tables and chairs outside those premises, it does make a difference. Liz, have you got anything you want to add on to that, or?
No, not really, but well, yes, just a couple of things, Marie, actually. I think the one thing, and again, this has been driven, you know, through COVID, although I've known a lot of the businesses in town, I've got to know them much better during COVID, because as Matthew says, we've developed a dialogue with them. And this week, for example, we've been into town and we've welcomed 2 new businesses. So we've been in to see the person running the new barbershop on Ship Street, and then we've been in and we've seen the beautician that set up a business in the market. And I think these are the things that are really important to do, and to get those new people, you know, coming in as new businesses involved with the, you know, the formal structure that there is for support for businesses, you know, through the Buzz Group, etc. So.
Thank you, Liz. I'm just conscious now we're coming up for about 7:20, and we are looking to sort of conclude at about past. So I'm just I've got 1 or 2 questions left. So I've got, how have you been working? Oh, sorry, I've just asked you that one. You've all been busy helping to get Brecon cleaned up. Tell us the work you've done so far, and going forward. Again, that's one you've already answered. I'm just going through this list of questions. I think you've actually... What sort of work has the council done to support people locally? Well, we've spoken about that. We've spoken about One Brecon. We've spoken about the businesses. So looking at my list of questions, guys, I think you finished. I've got no other questions on the chat box. Is anybody else listening got any questions they want to add before we wrap up for the evening? No? Okay, so I'm going to ask Liz, Matthew and David just for their final comments, their final views, and basically to say goodnight to everybody. So Matthew, do you want to take lead on that one, please?
Thanks, Marie. Well, I guess the first thing to say is thank you to you for cheering for us tonight. It's, you know, something that is always a daunting task, being asked to come in and cheer an event, but we're really grateful to you, actually, and you know, I really do value the relationship that we have locally with the GMB Union, which is my trade union. I'm very proud to be a GMB member, but I think it's really important for councillors and elected representatives to be in touch with the organisation that represents working people. So it's a really important relationship for me, and I'm very grateful to you for giving up time with your family to do this. I think, you know, as we end tonight's session, I think, you know, just to touch on a few things that I think already said, but the things I think are really important is that what's been inspiring through this pandemic period is the sense of solidarity and community that I think has always been here, but has really come to the fore and really prospered because of the virus and the situation that it's created. And I really hope that as a community that we can sustain that, nurture it, and really grow it, because I think this is a kind and caring community, and I think it shows us at our best. And the virus and, you know, the lockdown situation that came with it, I think really did bring out the best in people. And we saw, you know, all of us were out on our doorsteps clapping for the key workers, whether they be, you know, supermarket workers, or you know, whether they be public sector workers in the council, or people who work in the NHS, whether that be porters, cleaners, or consultants, because we all understand that actually a properly funded and a properly resourced public sector is the only way that we're going to be able to deliver good value public services that can support our communities when we're in crisis like this, these, you know, really challenging times. So I hope, you know, that really political message can come from this too, that I think is, you know, reinstilled in us the sense of value of our public services that have been, I think, really heavily asset stripped and decimated over the last 10 years because of austerity. I think too that we need to look again at our community and the services that we need. One Brecon has really been able to identify where there have been some gaps in local service provision, and we need to think about, you know, how we work with the council and the private sector to be able to challenge that and to change that, and make sure that when we are developing services, they are meeting the needs of the people who need them most. Because that's one of the lessons that's come out of this for me, is that actually we need to be able to change our services rather than just stay working in silos all the time. We're going to need to modernise what we've got to ensure that it can meet everybody's needs. And I think David hit the nail on the head when he said shop local. And I know it's difficult sometimes because, you know, price is really important, and that dictates where people are able to shop depending on how much money they've got. But if you can get it in Brecon and you know, it's within your affordability, please buy it locally, because, you know, we've got to recognise that the shops and the businesses that we've got are some of the big local employers. You know, if you take them all as a group, they employ a lot of people, and those people, you know, working in those organisations really depend on you know, the sustainability of that model. So we all want to thrive in high street, and we're all guilty of it. And I know sometimes we all shop on Amazon, but if we can support the high street, we really need to do it, because actually they've been incredible too. They've been another arm of that sort of key worker, if you like. You know, the way that the butchers adapted to be able to deliver to people, fruit and veg stalls were doing the same. You know, local takeaways providing, you know, home delivery service on food was absolutely fantastic, and showed that when we really need to, how we can absolutely join everybody together and have seamless services working to be able to get everybody through. And the final message is that this isn't over. This is probably going to be around for a considerable time. There's no sign of a vaccine coming forward. So I guess it's follow the advice, listen to what the Welsh Government are saying, listen to what Public Health Wales are saying, and really, as much as you can, you know, stick to that advice. Ensure that you're keeping yourself and your family safe. Wash your hands regularly and keep that social distance. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Liz, before you start, I'm just going to turn my light on, or I'm going to disappear into a black hole. If you want to start, Liz, and carry on.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to say any more, Marie, because I think that's a really good overview that Matthew's given about, you know, what we see the positions really, because I think we are all sort of on the same page, myself, Matthew and David. But I just wanted to say that we do, as a group of councillors, we're very proud of the work we do. We find it very rewarding, and we want to be visible and available for people in the community, because, you know, we're here to serve the community, and that's what our aim is for Powys County Council, that the council serves the community, and that we as members, you know, work well with them to do that. But, you know, the people of Brecon are the first priority. As somebody said this morning, it's the people of Brecon who pay the rates. So, yeah, thank you. And thank you, Marie, again, for organising this evening.
No worries, Liz. David?
Yeah, I just want to make one plug, because I referred to the fact that there are people who were shielding and isolating, finding it difficult to go back out into doing their own shopping, etc. And there are lanyards available, sunflower lanyards available from One Brecon. We've ordered more, because if you've got breathing issues and you're finding it difficult to wear a mask, etc., that there are these that you can put around your neck indicating that. And also for those who are hard of hearing as well, who need to lip read as well, so that people know. So it is trying to make things easier for people to go back out into the community. And I just wanted to plug that. But thank you, Marie, too, for the way you've chaired tonight's meeting. And for those actually who've taken the trouble to come in and join us at this meeting this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. So I just want to say thank you again to everybody who's taken part this evening and listened and asked questions. And I've always wanted to say this. So for now, it's good night from me and it's good night from them.
Yes.
Good night.
Night, night, folks. Thank you.
Thank you.